Hey, welcome back to Global Environment. We've been spending the last few weeks talking about guns, germs, and steel, the development of complex societies, and what occurs once they develop. Now, let's think about something else now. What happens when these complex societies come in contact with non-agricultural societies or more simple agricultural societies? What can occur? And it goes back to even a bigger question. It's very similar to Yali's question that we talked about. Think of this. Where do we find Europeans today? And contrast that with, for example, where do we find Native Americans today? Or where do we find Aborigines today? Or where we find Africans today? And it's interesting because you find Europeans, often more than any other group, all over the globe. You find Europeans all over the place. But you find them concentrated in certain areas. And that's important. It has to do with ecological imperialism. And let's just brainstorm. Where do you find Europeans? Europe, of course. Places like the United States and Canada. Certain places in South America like Argentina, Chile. How about in Africa? South Africa? You find them in Australia in high concentrations, New Zealand. What do all these places have in common? Think about it. If you looked at a map, where would they be? That's an important concept. So these are the Neo-Europes, the New Europes. And where are they located? Often in areas with similar latitudes and climates. So there are, a lot of Australia, is a desert, but the places near the coast have climates very similar to what you see in Europe. America, United States, Canada, very similar to Europe. Argentina, very similar to Europe. Even South Africa. Now that's interesting. So what could this mean? What could this mean? It feeds into the idea of ecological imperialism. So again, similar latitudes, similar climates, and what happened was that Europeans developed this very advanced society, complex societies with their agriculture, their domesticated animals and plants. They created this package that sustained complex societies, armies, the use of metal, technology, all those things supported by this agricultural base. And they were able to take this base and transport it to areas with very similar climates. They weren't able to do that, take their agriculture, this package, their societies, and easily move it to places like Zaire in Central Africa because the environment was so different. They couldn't bring all their animals, they couldn't bring all their plants, and they couldn't sustain their populations the way they had in these Neo-Europes. So they moved animals, pigs, cows, horses, even bees. And Crosby's writing talks a lot about situations where Europeans would come to a new land, drop off a couple pigs, come back 10 years later, and the area is swarming in pigs or cattle or horses. So again, they also moved the plants, the white man's weeds all over North America. And in fact, New Zealand, if you look at their forestry, 99% of the trees in New Zealand are from outside of New Zealand. Okay, so the impact, they really changed the environments. It was ecological imperialism. They brought their ecosystems to support themselves. And they brought their diseases too. And a huge impact on the populations, especially in North and South America, but also Australia. These people weren't immune to the diseases that the Europeans brought. And the readings describe cases where 99% of the population disappeared. And when you think of that story about smallpox being a person in one of the legends of the Native Americans, it's really eerie. And if you try to think of what modern or almost modern story relates to what was going on here with ecological imperialism, you might think of H.G. Wells and War of the Worlds. He had that in mind when he created that story where aliens are bringing not only themselves but their ecosystems with them. Okay, so we mentioned diseases. European diseases wreaked havoc in these new areas, these Neo-Europes. And, you know, basically we're talking about introduced species, invasive species, and how successfully they were able to take off in the Neo-Europes and help support the Neo-Europeans. Okay, so they recreated their European ecosystems. And again, this goes back to the idea that the environment can shape human history. And it's not just the other way around where humans are impacting the environment. The ecosystems can do the same thing to human history. And you know, what occurred? Just millions and millions of Europeans moving to the new Neo-Europes, the New World, over the course of about a century. So that these areas, these countries, have a totally reshaped population. So that's the idea of ecological imperialism. And think about how well this connects with guns, germs, and steel. It's really an extension of it. So keep that in mind when you're in the discussion. So I'll see you next time in Global Environment.